Good afternoon. Thanks everyone for joining us. And as we say, yes, our panel now is on reaching underserved communities, both looking at locally and around the world. And we've got a great panel that has experience in all that. What I'm going to do is start off and have each of our panelists introduce herself and say a little bit about the organization she's with and what you're doing to reach underserved communities. Why don't we start down here, Carol?
Hi, I'm Carol Dahl. I'm with the Lemelson Foundation, which is a private family foundation based here in Portland, Oregon. And our mission is to improve lives through invention. We work on invention because we believe that invention is critical to the future we all want, whether that's improving and addressing critical issues in our own community or addressing the big global goals of sustainable development goals that are out there for the world. So we work on improving lives through invention, and we also know that invention is critical in terms of the kinds of businesses that have driven the U.S. economy for more than a century, and so critical for the future of our economy as well. So we work on inspiring and educating a next generation of inventors, and we look to create sustaining systems because we need people and systems that will allow their ideas to turn into products and businesses that produce those products and they reach people for impact. So what does inclusion have to do with that, right? So the big point there is that, in fact, invention-based businesses, while they drive the economy, we don't see a reflection of the diversity of our nation reflected in the inventors and entrepreneurs who are out there. And that's really starts at the beginning. If there's a study that was done last year, which was called the Invention Opportunity Project, Equal Opportunity Project, which actually looked at where inventors come from. And what they found in that study is that inventors don't come from everywhere. They largely come from very affluent communities. So if you look at the differential between kids coming from poor communities and from rich communities, in fact, there's a tenfold difference there. So the kids who are coming out of under-resourced communities aren't turning into inventors, and therefore not inventor entrepreneurs who are powering the engine of our economy. Same applies, although it's a slightly less, for kids who are African American, kids who are Latino, and women. So if you're looking to find entrepreneurs who have great invention-based businesses, you're going to have a harder time finding them coming out of poor communities and also from disadvantaged populations and women. So what do we want to do about that? We need to change that demographic, right? We need to find the creativity amongst the diversity of the nation. We know that creative people can come from anywhere, they can become inventors, and they can make a big difference. So we work on programs that actually will change that equation, which is we look to create educational programs that immerse students in invention so that they come away with the ability to actually create and discover whether or not they want to invent. We work at the higher education level to make sure that institutions of higher education, all types of institutions of higher education, have access for invention, innovation, and entrepreneurship training, and also supporting systems to take those ideas out with young entrepreneurs. And then we work to make sure that there's a more equitable environment to sustain those entrepreneurs going forward. So we do our programs through other partners, and looking very much to reach into those communities that don't have equitable access right now to becoming inventors, to becoming part of that driver for the economy and that driver of change for the positive, for social benefit going forward.
Carol, thank you. Carrie.
Hi, everybody. My name is Carrie Naoni, and I'm the Executive Director of TIE Oregon. And we are a local organization of a global we are a local chapter of a global organization whose mission is to support entrepreneurship through funding, mentorship, and programming. Inclusion is really in our DNA. The program started, actually the global chapter started in 1992 when there were some successful entrepreneurs down in the Bay Area who came over from India, and they were really having a hard time getting funding, getting mentorship because of the cultural and the language barriers. And so once they finally had the time, money, and energy to put back into the ecosystem, they decided to start TIE. And since then, there's over 50 chapters globally. And so as you can see, it's just in our DNA everywhere you go. We've got another person here from TIE Seattle. Every chapter that starts, it's just right in the DNA from the get-go. What are we doing here specifically locally? We work with partners such as the Lemelson Foundation. We do a Thai Young Entrepreneur Program. Lemelson was instrumental in helping us change our entrepreneur curriculum into an invention-based curriculum that we now have running in 5 different classrooms in the Portland metro area. And it's fantastic. I mean, we're in alternative schools. The curriculum is actually mapped to the Common Core. So we're able to push this content directly into the classrooms. Because what we're finding is that, privileged youth can go to after-school programs or can go to weekend programs. But the underprivileged don't have that luxury. So by providing us by making sure that our curriculum is Common Core, again, we're able to get into math courses, we're able to get in graphic design courses, we're able to get into an electives, we're able to get to alternative high schools, and so we're able to get to those kids that just would not otherwise have the opportunity to experience invention-based curriculum. That's on the kids side, and that's about 150 students that we reach per year just in that program. On the adult side, we have a ton of different programming, but we approach it the same way. So we're working with cities who are actually funding our entrepreneurs to go and take our 30-hour boot camp called the Thai Excel Entrepreneur Boot Camp. So we've got the city of Beaverton here. They're one of our great supporters. They scholarship in about 20 entrepreneurs per year. Prosper Portland is another one of our huge supporters, and they put through about 45 entrepreneurs through our program per year. So we couldn't do it without our partners, and that's just a little bit about Thai Oregon.
Excellent. Crystal, tell us a little bit about Zapproved.
Hello, I'm Crystal Sinkoff. I'm the manager of workplace experience, diversity, and inclusion as Approved, which is a local tech software company here in Portland. And which part of, we're really interested in making sure that we have a diverse company and a diverse community in tech here in Portland. One of the things that we're very involved in is Tech Town Portland, which over 21 companies here in Portland get together and have a focus group and work together to find solutions to issues of diversity and inclusion in our businesses.
Excellent. Shalmina, you have both a local and a global focus, I believe, in the work that you do. Is that right?
I do. So I'm not going to speak about my organization per se because I am the organization. So I'm going to speak about myself. I'm a global empowerment speaker, and the reason I am a global empowerment speaker is because I was born in a very humble family in Tanzania. I was the first person in my family to obtain college degrees. And after I obtained my degrees in computer science and mathematics, I rose up to be one of the highest ranking women of color at IBM. I've ran billion-dollar businesses, and I did a lot of this while I was a single mother of 2 and 4. So there comes a point in your life when you say, oh my God, you've been too kind to me. And now what can I do to give back? So since 2014, I have stopped doing things for me and mine, which is what I did my whole life, and I now am focused on contributing. So I took an inventory of what is it that I can contribute. And what I realized after speaking at events is my insights. And as IBM vice president, I would go to the White House, I have been to the state's capitol, and we'd talk about how do we get more women in leadership position, especially STEM. How do we get more women of color into STEM? And the statistics are disturbing. Granted, they're better than they were, but interestingly enough, in computer science, when I obtained a degree in 1985, as a percentage of the population, there were more women obtaining computer science degrees then than there are now. So it's not where we want to be. We want to have more women. So anyway, so I did that, and for the first time when I spoke, not having a title of vice president of IBM, it was at my alma mater. I was invited to be a keynote speaker at a conference called Women Moving Ahead. It was inspired by Sheryl Sandberg's book, Lean In. I had to reflect upon my life because now I wasn't representing IBM. I wasn't here to talk about the organization that I worked for. I was there to speak about my insights. What can I share to accelerate the success of these young girls, young women? They could have been my kids. They were in their 20s. That got me started on this track of being an empowerment speaker, and it's been an incredible journey. I am able to reach underserved communities locally, globally. I speak at conferences, schools, high schools, colleges. I've been to Eugene. I spoke at the University of Oregon at their Women in Computer Science. And basically, I share my story. I share my story of embracing challenges. I share my story of becoming stronger as a result of your challenges, not to let your challenges overwhelm you. And yeah, so that's how I reach my population. I'm going to do it globally because I'm now starting to write a book. And you're going to ask me about the United Nations Foundation later, so I'll go into the global aspect of that.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Caroline Cummings, and I am the Executive Director and Venture Catalyst for an organization called Oregon Rain. We are a social venture, a nonprofit, and we started just 4 years ago. And what we do is we help high-impact startups launch and grow. And we mostly do that in small and rural communities, which is why I'm on this panel here today. The title Venture Catalyst really means that everybody on our team who are venture catalysts, which Brad is in the audience, raise your hand somewhere. What we do is we've been there, done that. So I've been the CEO and co-founder of 2 tech companies in Oregon. I've raised $1 million. Almost all of it was raised outside of Portland, which I was told that we were the only women to do that 10 years ago. So that was kind of cool. But my first company failed, and my second company I sold, and I learned so much more about failure and about success through failure. So at RAIN, what we do is our venture catalysts go out into these small and rural communities. We have a model to pull these entrepreneurs out of their home offices, their garages, their kitchens, and help them scale their business. So we do that by matching them with 4 things: people, talent, co-founders, programs, accelerators, meetups, pub talks, physical assets, labs, kitchen space, physical equipment, whatever they need, and then lastly, capital. Angel investment is really, I'm also an angel investor, so I have investments in several companies, most of which are outside of the Portland area. I try and really invest in women and minority-owned companies. So I'm really excited to be here today and talk about the specific needs and challenges that are in these underserved communities where we are the boots on the ground with them. Thank you.
Excellent. Hey, I hold that microphone because I want my first question to come to you. We're here in the Pearl District today. We're in a very affluent part of the city. We've tried to bring people to us today, but oftentimes when you need to reach an entrepreneur, a prospective entrepreneur from an underserved community, you need to go to where they are. Caroline, you just said you're going out to the rural communities. You're finding people in small towns. Starting with you, and then I want everyone else to jump in. How do you go about reaching people where they are and connecting with them on their own terms?
Mm-hmm. Great question. And is Lindsay Phillips in the audience from Florence, one of our entrepreneurs? I invited 7 specific rural entrepreneurs to come to this who live in Florence and Sweet Home and Oak Ridge and Newport. And they all had scholarships, and they were all going to get a $100 gift card as well to come here. And that is still a barrier for a lot of these entrepreneurs. And here's what we've learned about how to reach these companies and to reach these entrepreneurs. There's really 3 things that you have to do. 1, you want to join in, not swoop in, right? There's a difference there because a lot of times people who know a lot of things about a lot of stuff go into these small communities and it's almost like they need to be rescued or saved. So that mentality has to change. You just have to go there and join in, right? Secondly, and one of the most important things, is you have to shut up and listen. There's a great TED Talk by a guy named Ernesto Cerali who talks about what we do, but he does it on a global level. How you have to go into these communities and actually just listen. Don't talk at them, listen to them. Okay, so that's the second thing that we do that works really well. And then the third thing is you really have to show up and do service. Go in and say, we're here to help you, which is different than we're here because we have something to help you. It's a subtle difference, and that's what we've done, and we do it really well. And then the last piece I'll share before I hand it over is I'm in Eugene. We have venture catalysts in Lynn Benton community, I see David is here, he was on the coast with us. What's really important is that when we go into these communities, we're not going to tell them that this is going to take you 10 years. Like, a lot of entrepreneurs realize that this is a long haul. We first have to piece it out and chunk it out so that it's something that is achievable. And if we don't have buy-in from the city, so the cities fund us, if we don't have buy-in by the counties fund us, we're funded by foundations, we're funded by private, it won't work. So we have to be invited. If we're not invited, it doesn't work.
I love every single thing that she said, and I agree completely. The one thing that I will add is identification engages more than admiration. So many people go with these girls or underserved minorities and they want to talk about the great things they do. What really engages these minorities is when they can identify with you. So share your vulnerabilities, share your challenges so they can see themselves in you. Because once they identify, then they are engaged. Then they can say, listen, if she can do it, I can do it. So just remember, identification engages more than admiration.
Excellent.
For us, it's just really, again, working with our partners and having them lead the way. And going to Caroline's point, right? Let's show up and show them that, hey, we want to help. How can we help, right? But then also morphing whatever program that we might have and making sure that the people that are teaching the curriculum actually look like the participants. So all of our curriculum was actually created by entrepreneurs and is delivered by entrepreneurs. And when we are in a minority classroom, we have folks that, teaching and instructing that look like the students in the classroom. Another point that I would make is just meeting them where they're at, right? Again, I think somebody already said that, and listening to the actual entrepreneur, right? I mean, they probably have a lot more knowledge than they even recognize about their product, right? So it's really listening to them and then trying to help them understand maybe where we might have contacts that they need or that they might want to tap into, but not just, again, coming and talking at them, right? Really taking the time to listen, and it might even take several different meetings, right? Because you've got to build trust with new folks, right? I mean, it's just like any other relationship. You're just not, buddy with somebody right off the bat, right? And this is, you're dealing with people's hopes and dreams, and so it's super important that you take the time and you take the coffee meetings, and even if they need to meet with you over and over and over again to build that trust, it's what you do.
Yeah, I'd comment, we come from a slightly different space, obviously, because we're the funders of these programs, so we work through others, but we look for people who are coming from the communities themselves. We think that's the important thing, and people who are planning to stay in the communities. So for instance, we work in both the U.S. into programs that are reaching, like Thai, into communities that are low-income communities. We also work in the developing countries, and there we also work with local partners rather than parachuting in, and we want those partners to build capacity so they stay and become permanent. So really have to think about building the local ecosystem. I would add, I agree with all the comments that were made here, but I would add one more thing, which is that I think also, I don't think there can be assumption that every community enter is the same. And so you have to really listen when you get there about what are the other factors that are actually affecting the situation. So we find, for instance, in the educational programs that we have, depends on the community you're going into. There are other factors. You need to be able to engage, for instance, the parents. It's not just coming in with a program and handing it off, right? You have to be willing to think about, are there other factors around there? Are kids unable to get there? Do you need to bring in transportation, et cetera? So I think that there are additional things that we encounter, even for the entrepreneur level, people that we're supporting, where you have to step back and really listen, per your point, as to whether there are other factors you have to add to your programming in order to make it effective.
Excellent. Crystal, let me ask you about something Shalmina said. She talked about the importance of identification, that people can see, can relate to an experience. How does one accomplish that in the workplace? I hear again and again from people, if they're the only person from a group in an organization, like, well, who do I relate to here? Who do I work to? And let's face it, Portland's got some work to do on that front. How do you get started?
And we really do have a lot of work to do, but I think one of the most important things to do is how we create our climate within our workspaces. How do we create spaces for everyone to feel safe and feel like to build that trust? So this could be something as simple as how your workplace is set up. Do you have common spaces for people to go? Do you have work groups, employee resource groups for different parts of the community so they feel they have a safe place to go and talk and share their concerns, and so that they feel like they'd be heard? It's definitely a difficult thing, especially to do if maybe I think earlier in one of the other panels, they talked about how you need to start at the beginning. So one of the great things about Zapproved is that Monica and Chris, the founders of our company, they had this moral compass and this belief in having a diverse company from the beginning. And I think that if you can start at the beginning, that's really that'll really strengthen where you go as a company. But sometimes you have to start in the middle, and that can be really difficult. And I think that it's really important to sit down with the different groups in the company and see how the climate is, not necessarily overall as the entire company, but there are different work climates within that company. And so you can work directly with those groups.
Yes, I hear that all the time. There's a frustration from people. They say, well, the CEO says, oh, I think my workforce is very happy. And the CEO had never done the work to connect with people throughout the organization and get a sense of it. So I think well-run organizations are finding ways to get that message from each person in each group within an organization.
Oh, absolutely. It's really important that I know that our engineering team is working together to include everybody. And how do I do that? I sit with them and I listen. And it's really important to listen and to know that those people can come to you and you will listen. So.
Does anyone else want to weigh in on that question? I have another one then. We talked about a moment ago that we have a long way to go. I've been at the Oregonian for 14 years, and I think from the very beginning when I got at the paper, I heard from the entrepreneurial community in town, we want to do better, we want to do better. And so every year I go back and I look at the state data to look at the makeup of our workforce. And you know what? It's not getting better. It's getting less diverse. Or it's standing still. We have fewer women working in technology today than we did 14 years ago, than we did 20 years ago as a share of the workforce. What's gone wrong? Do folks have a thought on why there hasn't been more progress despite this sort of stated goal that people have?
So I can give a thought specifically for women in technology.
Yes.
Because I've been engaged.
You've been there.
I've been engaged in that field. And as I was telling you, there were more women graduating when I graduated in the mid-'80s than there are today. So what we have learned is that when you speak with young girls, they want to be engineers, they want to be astronauts, they really want to get into the STEM fields. But something happens around the middle school, high school age where somehow the media, the narrative around being in STEM is not cool. These women do not want to identify, again, going back to identification, because being in STEM is nerdy, it's socially awkward, whenever they see someone that's in STEM in middle school or high school, that's how they're portrayed. So we have a lot of work that needs to be done along the way. Now, this emphasis around STEAM, putting arts into STEM, is really changing, and the younger girls today are looking at STEM as a way to have an impact. So I believe that even though it went like this, it's starting to go up because STEM is not being looked upon as nerdy. It's being looked upon as a way to have an impact. So I have hope.
So, yeah, I'd like to comment on that. It's interesting. I think there are two pieces to it. And I think some of it, as you say, is background sort of cultural messaging that we're doing to women and girls, and also to communities of color in terms of what their aspirations should be, right, and kids from lower income communities. But I'd comment on what we've observed. One is the observation, I mentioned this study before, which is called Lost Einsteins, and in that, the observation was that if you go back and look at the data, it seems to come back to pre-work, pre-job. Very early on in your beginning, where you grow up has a huge influence on you, and it predominantly seems to be around seeing people who look like you, whether they're a woman or they're a person of color, or they come from a community like yours, and seeing that, oh, that's something I could do, right? So it's the conceptualization that you could be that, right? So that's one piece of it. But the second piece of it is you have to actually have the opportunity to experience that you can do it, right? So what we find is that you do have to have education programs that allow the opportunity to actually immerse in it. Your comment about women and girls, and also it, I think, applies to kids coming out of low-income communities, is that we have not taught STEM in a way that actually allows people to see the relevance in their life. And they assume it's not a creative endeavor. I'm a scientist. Sounds like you come from the engineering, computer science background. I tell you, that's all we do. It is creative, right? And so the implication that it's not creative is about the way we're teaching it. In fact, girls and kids coming out of communities that have a lot of core problems, if they're given an opportunity in their educational experience to actually contribute to solving a problem that they care about, it changes their entire sense of self-empowerment. So in fact, I'll give an example from the Thai, Oregon, and one of our program officers, who happens to be in the audience here, had the experience the first year that that program was running over at Benson High School, that after the program had run, one of the students said to her, I used to think I just had to go work for the man, right? And now I realize I can shape my own future, right? I can become an entrepreneur, I can become an inventor. I have all these opportunities in front of me. And to me, that's a transformation. Whether that person becomes an inventor or not, it's a transformation about the belief in what they can do. But it ties back to working on something they care about, not some abstract problem or abstract question. And so I think that's where we're losing people,
Oh, yeah. So one of the things that I think we're doing wrong is we're too politically correct. I grew up on the East Coast. I lived in Philly most of my life. I experienced a lot of different cultures. And when I moved to Oregon 15 years ago, I live in Eugene. I looked around and I said, where are all the black people? Where are all the Puerto Rican people? Where are these people? And people, put your voice down. It's like, why? Why can't we talk about race openly? What is the problem, right? And so I think if we don't name it and we don't call it out, we're not going to move the needle. The other thing we need to do is we need to measure it. We work with startups. We say if you can't measure it, don't make it, right? And so I think we need to put numbers to it. Now, diversity is a numbers game, but inclusiveness is really an impact game. So I am inspired by a woman named Janet Stovall, and she is on the executive team at UPS, and she was one of the first African-American women to be in a powerful position in that company. And when she was younger, she went to college at Davidson in North Carolina, and it was 1984. She was a sophomore there, and she looked around, and she didn't see many other black people, not only students, but on faculty. And what she did was she made a lot of noise, and she created a letter, and she submitted it to the dean and said, I want you to adopt Project 87. And 87 was the year that she was giving them to get this done. And she said, by the year 1987, I would like Davidson College to have 100 black students enrolled. I would like to have 50 black professors. I would like to have 5 Afrikaans studies, and I would like to have 1 black dean. And because she put the numbers out there, they had something to latch onto, and they ended up succeeding in that. So I think we all have to talk about the implicit biases that we have. I mean, neuroscience tells you that neurotransmitters fire a certain way when you're thinking about yourself. Science also says that your neurotransmitters fire the same exact way if you're thinking about the people in your circle, but when they have you think about other people, whether it's other colors of people, other cultures of people, other backgrounds, different neurotransmitters fire. And so that's how we're wired. We have to be able to talk about it and call it out, right? And if we don't have that dialogue openly, we don't put numbers to it and say, here's how we're going to measure it, and then what's the impact going to be, we're going to be sitting up here again next year, and not much has changed. So that's what I say.
And I would just add one last comment. I think it's important to, again, get to the people, and whether they be from the youth or adults, get to the people that aren't going to self-select themselves into a STEM career, right? Trick them into it. Figure out, that's what's so great about being an entrepreneur and being able to go out and teach entrepreneurship, is because what you're really doing is you're teaching people how to solve problems. You solve problems every day, right? But you might have an idea where, oh my gosh, I hate it when my toothbrush goes in the toilet. Well, fix it, right? And it's going to be a market. And guess what? Who's going to invent that? Let's figure out how you invent that. And that person may have never, ever thought of themselves as somebody that could do something in a STEM career, right? But that's what they're doing, and that's what's so great about entrepreneurship, is we're just solving problems.
Carol, you mentioned, the sort of realization that people have sometimes, wait a minute, this does relate to me. Do other members of our panel have eureka moments that they can share from their own lives or from people they've worked with that say, hey, this is something that really connected with me, or this is something I saw that really connected with some people I was working with? Does that ring a bell with anybody?
Are you talking in specific to diversity?
Yeah, diversity, maybe in a community that you say, hey, this was a story where I personally witnessed somebody, having a realization. I apologize, I'm putting you on the spot.
That's okay.
But
I can speak more generally in that when we get funded by the state and all the funders I mentioned earlier, there are some people who are skeptical and said, there's no high-growth companies coming out of these small rural communities. Monroe with 300 people, and Oak Ridge with 2,000 people, and Florence with 8,800 people. They're not there. And so I think that was an idea that we helped prove wrong, because we have found these high-impact companies there. But more importantly, what we found is that these entrepreneurs tell us that we are giving them permission to think big. And they say that if RAIN wasn't in the community, we wouldn't be growing like this, because we didn't realize that you could wrap all this support around us. People always say that, with youth organizations, that the way to help them is to wrap services around them. Well, entrepreneurs are at-risk youth as well. At least that's what I say. So we need to wrap services, the people, the programs, the assets, the capital, the mentors, all of those people around them. So we've proven them wrong, people who have said there's no there.
That's an excellent example of providing those resources and bringing them to people. What resources would folks say are most lacking? What do you say, boy, if only I had this, or only this community had this, that we'd be able to open that door?
I would say from the minorities that we've been working with in our boot camp, the TiExcel Entrepreneur Boot Camp, we've got them there for 30 hours, and then we release them, and they need somewhere to go, and they need somewhere to go in their own neighborhoods. And so I think it would be a really great idea if folks got together and started creating some working environments, some co-working environments in other parts of the city, instead of them always popping up in the Pearl and in downtown Portland. So I hear a lot of that from the entrepreneurs that we're working with, is that they'd love to be able to have co-working environments in other locations other than downtown Portland.
Oh, that's an excellent suggestion. Are there other thoughts?
Yeah.
Since we're in these communities, we always hear two things. It's M&M, money and mentors, right? And they think they need the money right away, but they need the mentors more than anything else. And a lot of people think, how can I get involved in helping small or rural or underserved communities if I haven't been an entrepreneur before? Anybody can mentor. And you don't have to have had to run a company. Maybe you're really good at branding. Maybe you're really good at sales. Maybe you're really good at coaching people or helping them do public speaking, whatever it might be. Everybody has something to give. And I really think that that's one of the ways. I have a cheesy saying that if everybody got mentored and found a mentor and mentored others, I truly believe that would really help the entrepreneurial ecosystem rise, not to mention trickle out into other areas of life.
So I completely agree with that. I think both of these, the facilities and spaces and also the mentors. The thing I would also say is that I think sometimes the entrepreneurs forget that they're actually mentors to each other too. And so there's a huge opportunity for people to actually help accelerate bringing together the entrepreneurs, not only with experienced mentors, but with each other. There are certainly models out there like Village Capital and others that show that the peer interaction is equally powerful. In some ways, it's less intimidating, and they learn more learning together. So I would encourage people, particularly the entrepreneurs who might be in the audience, to reach out to other entrepreneurs, as well as looking to find those mentors that can take them to the next space. So.
That's a good point. We hold events, and I know Ty does too, where those intentional collisions happen so that we make sure that they're interacting with each other.
So one of the things I would like to discuss is what we do. I have been on a board of an organization called Young Women Empowered in Seattle, and we serve women between the ages of 12 and 18, most of them from underrepresented communities, first-generation immigrants, refugees, and what we do is we show them what's possible. So we create a career day and we invite them all to come. And not only do we have some keynote speakers, we have different breakouts. So to give them a sense for what is possible. What does a career in journalism look like? What does a career in tech look like? What does a career in health industry look like? What does it feel like to be a doctor or an actress? So we expose them to all these different opportunities, which gets them to think about the possibilities, which I think is really important. So to reach out to younger people and to show them what's possible, regardless. I mean, this is all about entrepreneurship, but not everyone's going to be an entrepreneur. Someone may not be. So just show them all that's possible and then expose them to what it looks like.
Excellent. Excellent. I asked about what sort of resources you'd like to see. Let me ask you about obstacles. What sort of things get in the way? Is it attitudes? Is it preconceptions? Is it structure?
It's always the money.
Yeah?
The money is huge.
Yeah?
Also, I think it's time, and I don't mean my personal time, I mean our manager's time, our company's time. Do they have the time to focus on D&I within their work group? Do they have time to talk about that as part of their review process with the employees that we're working with? To me, there's just time.
Crystal, you mentioned Monica and Chris, your founders, and that they sort of made this part of their mission from the beginning. Can you say, how have they built that into the mission to make time or make the resources available?
I think one of the important things that has happened over time is that they have created a position for diversity and inclusion within the company. And I think that's really important that they put the money, as we said, money is one of the resources, is that we need to hire people to help with that, to support different organizations in the community that will someday come back to us too. So I feel like they've been really good at looking at the bigger picture and the long-term goal with that.
So my perspective is really to get these young people to believe in themselves, to get them to feel like I can do this. And so to reach out to them, share stories, show successes, discuss challenges, get them involved, and get them to believe in themselves. Once they start believing in themselves, it starts a fire that cannot be extinguished.
Yeah, and I would add to that I think it goes deeper. I think that's the sort of inspiration portion of it, and people need to be inspired to take the energy and effort it takes to actually then accomplish something. I think we fundamentally need to think differently about how do we change things for the future, which is not just the entrepreneurs that we are lucky enough to find today, but we change the way we think about education practices so that we allow children to experience some of these opportunities, invention, entrepreneurship, during their educational process, because I think without fundamentally changing that, we basically are putting kids through an educational system that doesn't cultivate that kind of thing. So what we're seeing are the exceptions who are coming out. And I think as long as it's all around the sides and the periphery, we will exclude people. And it's not until we get into public education and fundamentally change so that kids can have immersive experiences in both invention, entrepreneurship, that we'll see a change in the demographic, I think, for the long haul, that's really sustainable and not just sort of Band-Aids.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Hey, I think we're out of time. We've had our 45 minutes. I want to thank our panel. You guys have been excellent. I want to thank our audience for coming. It's such an important topic. I really appreciate you giving it your attention and your thoughts. Thank you.